Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the regular Committee of the Whole meeting of Wednesday, June 14th. My name's Ian Morrison, Director for Cowichan Lake South Scotts Falls, and I will be your chair for today, for this meeting. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that this meeting is taking place in the territory of the Cowichan people and acknowledge their presence and stewardship of this area for millennia. With that, I turn to the agenda, and Ms. Ferguson, what have you got for us today?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have the approval of the agenda with an amendment to move R7 to the beginning of the meeting. To the beginning of the report section, pardon me.
Moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Douglas. Any discussion on the adoption of the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. I should mention and welcome Director Manhas, who is joining us remotely, and we'll see if Director McClinton joins us shortly as well. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is the adoption of the minutes, and that's the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of May 10th, 2023.
Moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Nicholson. Any discussion on those minutes? Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is public input period, and I believe we have 2 in the lobby.
We have, I'd like to welcome anyone that would like to provide input to the committee today on items on our agenda. Please come forward. You've got 3 minutes to provide input. Make sure you point the microphone up towards you and press the button that makes it red there. You're on. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Colin James. I live in West Holme Valley resident. And today you are here to be presented with the Lower Chemainus Watershed Floodplain Management Plan. Our community met on the 30th of this year to review the draft edition of this plan. The community overwhelmingly reject that plan for a myriad of reasons. I only get 3 minutes to address you, so I won't start listing all the reasons we found it unacceptable. Instead, I will refer you to a letter we sent to the CVRD in April following our meeting outlining our concerns. The concerns we highlighted in that letter are echoed on page 45 of the report that you'll be presented with today under the heading of threats resulting from the implementation of the proposal. In our letter, we expand on the problems more comprehensively. What I would like to do is focus on the one topic that the community desperately wants to see addressed: increased conveyance or channel management. That's what NHC call it, and we feel that those headings have negative connotations. I have lived on the river for 42 years, and I'm a newcomer in comparison to many of my neighbours. In all the years I have lived there, there hasn't been one iota of stewardship. There has been no governance, and any governance that has materialised has just been in the form of restrictions and rules that prevent landowners along the riverbanks from carrying out any stewardship that might enhance the condition of the river, its tributaries and its channels. There has been no positive governance. The community wants stewardship of the entire river system. The river has been abandoned by all levels of government. For over 100 years, industrial logging has been carried out in the upper watershed, and much of the devastation meted out on the river system in the delta is a direct result of that industrial activity. Now the government and the forest industry are promoting manufactured wood products that will supersede dimensional lumber and allow Mosaic and its peers to log smaller and smaller trees, hence reducing the turnaround time between logging operations, which in turn will drastically reduce the amount of time the ecology of the upper watershed has to recover and repair itself. Therefore, the damage to the entire river system is compounded. The river no longer functions in anything that resembles a healthy ecosystem. Fisheries will have you believe that the river should be allowed to naturally evolve and remain in a state of flux. Yet the pressures foisted on the river are not natural, and this policy that has endured for way too long and has been an abysmal failure. The salmon returns are so low on the Chemainus River that fisheries can't tell you how many return each year because they no longer bother to count. Is that not an indictment of failure? NHC claim that the gravel removal would have only a small effect, but they only propose to remove gravel within a 4-kilometre stretch. Would anyone here present at this meeting today who has any influence over the public works departments of their councils, would they instruct their supervisors to advise their staff to remove blockages in their storm sewers and sewage lines in only a limited length of those lines? The entire system, the river, the flood channels, the creeks and the tributaries are plugged. They are blocked. Their capacity to carry and contain water has been utterly negated. It is time for stewardship. It is time for restoration. NHC say in this report, there is a danger that gravel and sediment removal will create scouring. A few sentences later, they claim that gravel removal would be required to be done frequently. Both these statements cannot be true at the same time. Gravel removal does have to be done periodically because logging in the upper watershed continues to degrade the entire system. As long as you maintain and expand industrial activity in the upper watershed, you have a responsibility to constantly maintain and continually work on maintaining the good environmental stewardship in the Delta.
Mr. James, are you near your concluding remarks?
Sorry?
Are you near your concluding
Yes,
remarks?
yes.
Very good, proceed.
The damage has been going on for so long now that clearing out the river must also be done in tandem with bank protection, where erosion has been allowed to go unchecked for far too long. The First Nations have been trying to establish and maintain a fishery on the Chemainus River. Cleaning up the river will allow these efforts to be successful. Farmers are losing land to erosion. Bonsall Creek is so plugged that hundreds of prime agricultural acreage is lost because it cannot drain. Multi-million-dollar dikes are not the answer. Care and a desire to protect the river and the environment is what should govern our choices and our responses. Not to react to protect public infrastructure, but to protect the land and the water. Climate change is all around us. Nature is hitting us with a sledgehammer every day and trying to get us to wake up and be good stewards and land protectors. The river and the surrounding watershed has been abused and neglected for too long. Let's clean this mess up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James. Would encourage anyone else who would like to provide input to the committee, please come forward.
Hi, my name is Don Ellingham. I'm a farmer on the Chemainus River. I'm here representing my neighbors and friends of the West Home Valley. I've lived on the river for 60 years, and I've seen it at our highs and lows, and I'm not talking water levels either. We live on a floodplain, the West Home Valley. I'm sure you know where it all is. It floods. We have to live with that. HRC, Ministry of Environment, Forestry, they talk about the 200-year flood. Well, you know what? I'll take the 200-year flood on the chin. We're concerned about the floods year after year after year. That's our concern. Is the floods getting worse? Yes, it is. Talk to anybody, my neighbors. It's coming in the second bay of my barn. It's never done that for 60 years. 60 years. The water's getting higher. Why? Is it climate change? I don't know. Is it poor forest management, upper watershed management? I don't know either. Is it channel management? Probably. One of the things we're looking at is dikes along the river from the upper Chemainus, from the highway bridge down across one side. Well, even HRC, Environment Ministry, they even admit you put dikes on one side of a river, it's going to push water on the other side and flood my neighbors out. Worse. Well, if that happens, I can get you lawsuits involved. You have to skip a page. You guys don't have the booklet we have. We had a meeting in Crofton a couple months ago, and the unanimous assent was we clean out the river. If you look at the river, drive over the bridge on the back road. Geez, the water's low. No, it's not. Our wells haven't gone down. The channel is full of gravel, and the government doesn't want to do anything about it. They'd rather build a dike, take out the Indian Railroad. We're asking gravel removal. There's a value in this gravel. You're building a hospital, you build a high school, there's river gravel at the hospital. There's a value in this product. At nothing, we can hopefully get it off at cost. Cowichan River, they remove gravel. Guess where it's ending up? At the high school. Drive by on the highway, you'll see round rock on their footings. That's river rock. That's how rocks get round. Can't do anything on the Chemainus gravel. No, it's got to stay there. Myself, I'd like to see the mouth of the river all the way back. If you guys are familiar with the area, the Chemainus River used to run to Chemainus, to Bear Point, you know, where the refinery is and stuff. It doesn't go there anymore. That's a total dry channel bed. Now it goes out to Swallowfield Farms, halfway out to Bonsall, and it's looking for a new escape now pretty soon. So like I say, let's just fix the yearly flood, remove gravel, return the river to its natural flow course. Nobody's here. You should see how many times they fly the river in their helicopter looking at it. So there's nobody here. Well, Jeff's here, I guess. I wish there was other environment fisheries here. I'd tell them, get their ass out of the helicopter, come down to ground zero where I am. I'll show you the river and show you how bad it is. Drive over the bridge, the back road, and look at it. Look down there. We used to jump off the Chemainus River Bridge into pools when we were kids. You know what's there now? Gravel. How good's that for the fish? We used to swim that channel to be straight across all summer with water. 2 feet deep on the shallow side, 6, 7 feet on the deep side. Guess what? That's the Chemainus River in the summer now. I was down there, chum salmon were trying to spawn. They were stuck in rapids. The seagulls were picking away at them. Is there water in there? Yes, but there's also gravel. I'd like to thank you guys for listening to this. If something doesn't get done to the Chemainus River channel management in a couple of years from now, don't call it the Chemainus River. Call it the Chemainus Drainage Ditch. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much for your input today, and would call on anyone else. Looks like we don't have anyone, no one online. Next item, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next up is delegations, and we have Jacques Hildebrand from the Cowichan Public Arts Gallery, progress and funding.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. We are on. Thank you very much. It's really great to be here. I think this is the fourth time I've addressed council here. First time was after we had begun our project in 2017. There's a lot of progress has been made. And how can I change the arrow keys? Oh, arrow keys right here. Okay, thank you. Right way. Must be the wrong arrow keys. Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, okay, I was using the other ones. That's the problem. Okay, thank you. So we have a lot of changes have happened over those past years. We've made some very, very significant advances. One of them is that we now own the Green Door, which is the heritage house in which our MLA has his offices. We own that. We have title to that building very recently. we took out a mortgage, took out a mortgage to redo the whole bottom floor to turn that into an art gallery. Yes, c'est moi. So this is our space right now. It's the lower level of the green door, and we took a mortgage out in order to accomplish this. We took a $50,000 mortgage out, and with some other granting fund, have put this project together. If you have not been there yet, I would highly advise you go and take a look. It's really first-class accommodations. And this is one of the shows actually that's going on right now, Miigwechsihwak, by a sculptor, a Cree sculptor who does stone carvings of the little people that the Cree folk believe in. These are some of the past shows we've done. We have now, this exhibition now is our second exhibition in our own space, but we rented space previously to put these other exhibitions on. And they're always well attended. Most of the exhibitions we've had to date have been 9 to 1,000 people over the course of the exhibition. So one of the things I want to talk to you a little bit about is some support, form of support. I was in touch with one of the senior administrators from one of the municipalities here in terms of some of the funding that was coming from the provincial government. And I was told that it was very difficult to do that without the support of the rest of the communities. I did a little poll on our gallery figures. Less than 1 in 3, 1 in 4 people are from the city of Duncan. The rest are from our outlying regions, and with a number from elsewhere. And what I think that points to is the significance of the population that actually attends the gallery. So we have from the very beginning said that this is to be a Couch and Valley-wide project. We maintain that's the case. We are in the process now of trying to put the funding together for our Class C plan. We're looking at about $350,000. We have some folks that we're asking that money for, not from you necessarily, but we do need that money. That's our first big financial hoop to get to our big challenge, which is a $35 million brand new public art gallery. So when I'm speaking to some of the folks here, they were saying, well, what do other communities in fact do to support their art gallery, public art galleries? So these 44.7% of galleries' budgets come from their municipalities. There are no communities that do not support their public art gallery. We've now been in existence, as I say, from 2017. We now have a building. We are legitimate, but we need some funding. We need some funding in order that we can have some full-time staff to help us move through our transitional period to the ongoing capital fundraising. And and because of that need, I am here asking if it's possible for the CVRD and the other municipalities, North Cowichan and Duncan, to come up with some sort of a funding formula for us. We would really like to be a line item so that we have some continuity and regular funding. As it says on the slide here, some of those, about 5 of those major galleries actually are the buildings are maintained and owned by their municipalities. So that 44% doesn't include that. It brings that considerably higher when you consider. It is a really great community experience for everybody. Our aim is to bring art from outside of the valley. 15% will be local artists, the rest will be outside. We are now in negotiations with the Cowichan tribes for input from them because our board made a motion several years ago that we would dedicate space for Cowichan tribes, as well to hire an Indigenous curator for those exhibitions. I got to get my glasses. So the exhibition that's on right now, as I mentioned, was Miigwechsihwak. In the past, you can see some of the exhibitions that we put on. I think what I really like to emphasize, and I'm just wrapping this up now, is that this is a tremendous growth potential for the Valley. A tremendous growth potential. Our intention is to have the second largest public art gallery in British Columbia, bringing in artwork from around the world and outside of the Valley. To date, we have already had a major art supplier asking if there would be a 4,000 square foot space in that new building. Opus, in fact, where I'm talking with Opus building art supplies right now. We have several MOUs or we're putting together several MOUs with people who wish to have retail, arts-related retail space in that building. This will be kind of cornerstone our economic abilities as we move forward. But as I say, at this point, we're at a place where we need to have somebody on full-time. I can promise you tens of thousands of hours have gone into this project to date. And that's all volunteer time. The project is way too large. I and the people on our executive and on our board are putting in, I put in full week working on this as a volunteer, and so I'm not in my studio anymore, which is a little disconcerting. But that's the kind of dedication that's gone into this. We have 11 board members. We have 153 paid membership. We have over 2,000 people who have signed a petition to have this gallery in our valley. So what I would like to do now is I'd like to thank you very kindly for listening to me. I hope that you will listen to what I have to say in terms of coming up with some sort of strategy for funding from the communities that are well served by our project. So we have a number of champions. Actually even sitting at this table, including Tech, who's not here, who has managed to get us a meeting with the Canadian Cultural Spaces. This is where we're looking for some major funding, and Tech was very helpful in putting that together. So I thank all of our champions who sit around the table here. I hope everybody will become a champion in their own right, because this brings something to the Valley that's not been here yet. So thank you very kindly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hildebrand. I'm not sure if we have questions from directors, but I would like ask if the presentation can be lowered so we can see the entire team. Perfect. And I look to directors. I see Director Douglas. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Hildebrand, for the presentation. I know as we've discussed before, North Cowichan and the City of Duncan have a shared local area plan for the University Village to increase density and amenities in that shared space between our municipalities. And in my view, what you've proposed here really fits with that vision. So yeah, glad to see things are moving forward. The comparison you did of different communities in terms of what local government provides for funding for these art galleries is very helpful. And I'm wondering if, based on that list, that you provided the square footage size, there's quite a range from kind of smaller art galleries to the large ones in the urban centers. Do you have a sense of which would be most comparable to the current exhibition space that you have, and what would be most comparable to the ultimate vision if you're able to move ahead with a much larger facility after getting that Class C estimate?
Right. I would say Penticton is relatively close. Size just is not a really good comparison because it has to do with the ability of the municipality to support or not support. So I wouldn't say that's a really close range to be. We are not asking for any specific figure at this point, but what we would like to do is we're hoping that some negotiations can take place in regard to this item that we could be present at. We do have lots and lots of information, not just on this particular gallery, but the huge economic benefit of cultural tourism, which, as you all know, I'm sure brings almost 3 times the amount of money and goods to a community when it's properly put out there. Does that answer your question, Rob?
Yeah.
More or less?
That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Go to Director Acton next. Anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I'm glad that Director Douglas brought up the data. I think if it could be more focused on regional districts, versus municipalities? And if, like, for example, you showed Vernon, so is that funding coming from the city of Vernon, or is that coming from the regional district?
That's from the regional district.
Right, so, and then how big is that population? So
Yeah.
that's my,
It's
just trying to
comparable,
understand.
it is comparable to our valley-wide population. I think we're at 90,000 here or something in that neighborhood. I think they're 120, if
Right.
my figure is right. So it's relatively comparable to that community.
90,000 in Vernon, but not in the regional district
In the regional district of Vernon, yeah.
of the Okanagan.
No.
Okay, I'm not going to argue about
Okay,
the
yeah.
numbers, but, and then I guess my question is, what kind of, so you stated that, you know, we need a international gallery, so I'm just wondering what kind of engagement you did to come up with this conclusion, because what I'm seeing in the communities is that we need more representation for local artists versus international, and that's what a lot of tourists like to see.
Sierra, that's a well-taken point. Our research has led us to understand, well, first of all, we have 4 arts councils in the area. All of those arts councils, their job is to represent local artists. And I will say that there was a little bit of resentment when we first came in because they thought we would be taking over their territory. That is not our intention. That's why the board set a 15% roof or ceiling for local artists. What this community has not had has not had the ability for children, seniors, adults to go to an art gallery that brings work from around Canada and around the world. And that is our intention. So it's also an educational piece as well as a cultural growth piece.
And then my final question,
Go ahead.
okay, I can not ask it.
Go ahead.
Just to have a comparison to Victoria, what Victoria has to offer, and Nanaimo would be also beneficial.
Both of them have...
When you come
yeah.
back, or,
Yeah, no, that's fine. Oh, I can answer that. Both of them have particular mandates. The mandate for the Victoria Art Gallery primarily is to show their collection, their permanent collection. The art gallery in Nanaimo, although they're looking to grow a little larger, they have 4 exhibitions a year. Our new gallery will have 4 exhibition spaces. It'll have a general purpose room where workshops and small arts festivals such as BC Composers Festival, that kind of cultural stuff will go through there. It will also have, in order to help us support ourselves, it'll have a restaurant and lounge on the top. The very top of the building we're talking about is supposed to have and the final plans are not ready yet, but we're looking at around 6 to 10 live-work exhibit spaces for artists as apartments on the top. So it very much will become a cultural hub for the valley, and I think as Mr. Mayor Douglas has pointed out, fits in very well with the idea of a concentration of space for this kind of project. And so I believe that works very well for us as well as for the remainder of that project, because it will draw in an awful lot of people. And especially when our new building is done and we're bringing in those exhibitions that could not be shown elsewhere in the valley.
So before I go to Director Wilson, I'm going to ask if you might either push the microphone away a little bit or not be quite so close to
sorry.
it.
I thought it was my sore throat.
No, it's all good. Director Wilson, followed by Stone. Is anyone else wanting to get on the speakers list? Director Toporowski, go ahead, Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hildebrand. That's good. Can I ask, please, I've got a couple of questions here. What other sources of income do you have? Do you charge people for entry or anything like that?
No, we do it by donation. Admission is by donation.
Okay. And the local, I agree entirely, I think, with what has been said by others. The local art, I think, is more important to me, anyway, than the international stuff. And by local art, I tend to mean the whole of the Pacific Northwest, including our American neighbors.
Right.
We have a huge amount of
We do.
resources here, a huge amount of history. I would much rather see that. And one of the things that I have a real problem with is at the strategic meeting, we were talking about climate mitigation, which we're trying to do. And on the other hand, we have a lot of people saying we need to bring in more tourists. Well, more tourists mean this, that, and the other. How are you resolving the fact that bringing more tourists in is going to maybe add to the climate change mitigation that we're trying to put in place here? There's my problem right there.
Okay, well, it's a problem that would face any project of this nature, whether it be a new apartment building, where people bring guests to their homes. I mean, that's, if you have a project, that is going to be a consideration for every one of those. Our building, and we have an MOU with Christian Lintott Architects and Lord Cultural Resources. The mandate for the plan is to be a net zero energy building. So we're looking into that right now. I can't tell you that's going to be exactly so. That's the aim and goal that we're looking at, and our architects assure us that we can get pretty darn close to that through a variety of aspects. In terms of bringing more people into the valley, I think that you really hit the nail on the head, sir. We know that our natural resources, this was basically a natural resources-based community. We know those natural resources are gone. I was a commercial fisherman when I went through university. Things are so entirely changed. This community relied on fishing, relied on logging, and many other kinds of natural resources. What are we going to do to replace that? What can we do that's greener than building a new mine or any of those other particular things? Well, the project that we're proposing is exactly that.
Thank you very much.
Director Stone?
Hey, thanks, Jock. Really appreciate the presentation and your drive to get this project going and off the ground. Just back to a question I think I brought up before. How much engagement have you had with the local arts councils, and what's their level of support?
We have letters of support from the arts councils, as we do from the CVRD. We're working hand in hand to help each other out. Our biggest one, of course, is the Cowichan Valley Public Arts Council. Elizabeth, who is now their CEO, is a former board member. We have met and we are talking and are doing various exchanges, such as cross-promoting each other's exhibitions in any other way that we can help with that kind of thing. Sir, to your question about Pacific Northwest exhibitions, I would completely concur with that. The arts councils have a mandate to operate within their municipal boundaries, which means that their mandate is not to bring stuff from Pacific Northwest, from slightly down from the States or anywhere else. Their mandate is to take care of the artists in their region. And thus we occupy an entirely different place. And for example, the Arts Council rents their space, sorry about that guy. The Arts Council rents their space to artists to have exhibitions. We do not. We finance the artists to come. We pay artists to come to exhibit using the CARFAC fees, which is a national standard for artists who bring exhibitions. So our mandates are totally different. The short answer is that the Arts Council's mandate is not to bring art from outside the valley.
Director Stone?
So, yeah, so back to my questions. This is my limited time and two questions here. The other one was, and I brought this up in our previous meeting as well, many of our communities within the region have made substantial multi-million-dollar commitments to the arts communities that are here, and combined with, sort of that hard and soft infrastructure needs that go on throughout the region. Being that this is a sort of upper level art gallery, with this list that you've got here, because I don't see many of our local galleries here, are you focusing more on this type of international art gallery? The reason I ask that is I did reach out to our Arts Council about this project. Their response was they haven't been asked for support yet, so that's where my question came from. And in Ladysmith, we've committed in a multi-phased, multi-year project over, I would say in today's dollars, probably $40 million to an arts and heritage hub on the waterfront. The first $5 million project is underway now. So when we're making throughout the region significant commitments to our local arts councils based on years of engagement and planning, and we also have an adopted public arts strategy and committee, which adds again to the budgeting. It's just challenging at this sort of next level of project to figure out where we would be able to afford to fund it from. And I guess then the question is, at this level of art gallery that you're talking about, wouldn't this be more provincial, federal, and then self-sustaining based on its business model rather than needing a government subsidy at the local level to remain feasible?
Right. Okay. Well, that's another very good question. And the fact is that we already get money from BC Arts Council. There are various other funding institutes that we get some money from. We have just now become able to access Canada Council money. All public art galleries do this, but they do need that core funding to help them be stable. As everybody knows around here who's ever written grants, it's a really, you hold your breath and ride the roller coaster. Core funding for us is really essential. We are starting some areas of core funding, such as the admissions to our gallery. The more people who come into our gallery, the more money comes into our coffers. And right now, I think and so this is Anne Burnett. She is our secretary and treasurer. So I'm sorry, Anne, not to have introduced you earlier. But we're seeing some substantial gains in those kinds of things. As well, we're also talking about having cornerstone enterprises that we will rent to tenants that help us pay for our project. Well, we can't do that unless we have some more help. We are at the limits of our volunteer services.
Thank you. And just a final comment, I think the concept is amazing. I think it's challenging time for local government. I've been really, I think, clear about this from the beginning with the needs that we have and the financial realities that we face. And our arts councils, at least mine, is always coming to us looking for more. And we're feeling like we can't afford on that scale. And it just makes me worry about if we can afford to sort of move up to the next level without sort of a clear mandate maybe from the communities when our local arts councils are also looking for a higher degree of support. But this sort of, we talked about it in the meeting, a hub and spoke model. You have a major draw, hopefully would be really simpatico with the rest of the arts communities in the region. But so I do support the idea conceptually. Financially, it's a tougher thing not for me to crack, but I appreciate the work that you're doing very much.
Thank you kindly. We do intend to work hand in hand with all of the other arts communities in the valley. That's our mandate, and my personal mandate is the more art. More art, the better. And for a variety of reasons, social, economical, cultural, all those reasons go to putting stuff. And we're not looking for a referendum to build this building at this point. I reserve my option to do that at some point in the far future. But we are looking for some money to help us with staffing. That's critical for us right now. Thank you.
So before I go to Director Toporowski, to close, after that, we'll hear from Mr. Elzinga, and then we'll see what the committee wants to do in regards to perhaps directing staff to do some exploration. So Director Toporowski to close. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jacques and Anne
Yep.
for being here today. Another director had brought up your vision, and I know that you had come to Cowichan Tribes, presented there, and another space, I can't remember where, I seen you at another meeting, and you presented your vision of what your art gallery would look like. And in that presentation, you had mentioned dedication for space for First Nations local art.
Yep.
So I'm just wanting to share with the table that he's probably really nervous being in front of us right now.
I never get nervous. I just look nervous.
Anyway, or forget, lots of information to remember. I think just mentioning that, and if you can touch on that, but also You mentioned the curator. You're going to, and you passed that motion a couple of years ago. I know COVID's been throwing a wrench into a lot of things. And if you could advocate with others, you mentioned the local arts councils and whatnot, to advocate for First Nations local art, because as we heard at the table here, there's limited spaces for local artists here to actually go out and sell their artwork or have that platform to show their artwork.
Deborah, you are absolutely right, and right from day one, it has been my intention to draw the First Nations community in. As you know, everybody wants somebody to sit on their board from Cowichan Tribes right now. It's almost a provincial mandate. You want something done. I don't know how those poor folks are dealing with the onslaught, but we do have a meeting. I had a meeting with Cowichan Tribes last week with their leadership team, and they are bringing forward information to Chief and Council. They're talking about putting a member of council to sit on our board. That being so, and hopefully it will be so, moves us a long way towards where we want to be in terms of that relationship, cultural and artistic. We passed that mandate 2 years ago that we're going to get a substantial amount of ongoing space to Cowichan Tribes to exhibit, and to hire an Indigenous curator so that I'm not doing the explaining. We need somebody who's Indigenous who can talk, you know, from a much greater cultural viewpoint than I can on that. So yes, big piece to our project. A big piece to our project.
Follow up?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jacques. So the curator, also, you had mentioned you had a meeting with Cowichan Tribes last week.
Yeah.
Part of that hiring of the curator should be involving them
Yep.
as well.
Yep.
Because I've seen mistakes made from past organizations or people that have good intentions, but hire somebody that's from like Haida Gwaii or somewhere, and if you know the history.
Yep, I
as
do.
you know,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So just a point on that. And,
Right.
And then the question of local art, so.
Right.
And that's just my input. and-
Yeah. Well, local artists, of course, would have access to that exhibition space. Local First Nations artists. To date, we've had 3, and we have 2, and we have a third one. Indigenous exhibitions have been in the gallery, and that's out of our total of 9 exhibitions. So already substantially well represented in our exhibitions.
Great, thank you very much. Great presentation, thorough discussion amongst the directors and questions answered. Thank you very much for that. Wish you good fortune in this, and I'll go to Mr. Elzinga and ask what he has to offer, and then discuss what the committee would like to do. So, Mr. Elzinga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 points relevant to this conversation. So currently within the 2023 budget under Function 400, there is support for the 5 sub-regional arts councils, $50,000 for those councils, as well as $30,000 for grants for other organizations. That's your annual contribution. However, the board has recognized that there is other arts interests that are not funded, and so you have approved a supplemental item in the 2023 budget for a cultural plan. So our Arts and Culture Division is currently working with our Procurement Division to get resources to launch a probably year-long public engagement starting this fall, so that you will have recommendations on arts and culture going into the 2025 budget. So that process is underway right now, so we are looking forward to a cultural plan basically a year from today.
Thank you, Mr. Elzinga. You can have a seat now.
Thank you kindly, everybody, for listening patiently to me.
Yep, thank you. Director Acton to Mr. Elzinga.
Just for clarity, will that plan come back to us for input on the questionnaire? And I guess my question is based around, will the public be asked questions? You know, do you support this, but are you aware, and do you support the funding for it, kind of thing? You know, it'd just be I think for, as Director Stone pointed out, or others have pointed out, the funding matter is really the concern. So just wondering if they'll come back so that we can understand what kind of engagement will happen.
Mr. Elzinga?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through to Director Acton. It's obviously early days, so I don't understand the parameters of the engagement. Having gone through the Regional Recreation Strategic Plan, as we did a few years ago, it was a fairly extensive engagement using a number of different methodologies. What I'm hearing is the board would like some input into that, and staff has certainly heard that, so we can certainly bring that forward. But as for the actual questions or how that would be framed, I couldn't answer at this time.
So before I go to Director Stone, what I'm sort of trying to narrow the focus to is the ask that's been put before us today, and if we want to direct staff to do anything additionally in regards to talking to our municipal partners and the likes, in addition to what is already in the hopper as far as what Mr. Elzinga has described. So I've got two folks who've just raised their hand. I'll go to Director Justice first, then to Director Stone.
Yeah, thank you. This is, I think, a question for Mr. Elzinga. With respect to this upcoming plan, Mr. Hildebrand made the argument that this gallery will be an economic development opportunity for the Cowichan region. I was wondering whether Economic Development Cowichan would have a chance to examine the merits of that argument in the formation of that plan.
Mr. Chair, through to Director Justice. So again, staff are hearing potential collaboration with other divisions within the Cowichan Valley Regional District. I do think that's a good idea. And as you know, the Sport Tourism Initiative that we're involved with has economic development implications. So that's been a collaboration for some time. So I'm certain that I would be asking Mr. O'Riordan for some input from his team, but I'm not sure if Mr. O'Riordan wants to comment further. We're good.
Thank you.
So I'm sure Director Stone doesn't need the reminder, but I'm trying to narrow focus and not
So am I.
expand focus. So Director Stone, please proceed.
Again, I was hoping that staff would tee this up for us, but I don't want the conversation to sort of end and then have to have their team come back to remind us or harangue us or however you want to phrase it. So I don't want it to sort of die here, but I'm wondering if we need to sort of push it down the road a little bit without losing track of it. I don't know if just referring this conversation to that process would be appropriate, or to Mr. Elzinga's department for feedback, but I think it's where we're at right now as a board. We're close to our strategic planning goals, those kinds of things. I think it's premature for us to sort of ask for staff reports and stuff, but I don't want it to die. So I think I would probably refer the presentation and the conversation to Mr. Elzinga's department for consideration in conjunction with their work around the larger arts question in the region, but I think that's the only motion I can make right now.
And was that a second? Okay. Great. I was going to ask for staff to jump in as to whether or not there was a preferred course of action, but we now have a motion on the floor. I turn to everyone, and would you like to hear from staff as to whether or not they can do anything in addition to what they've already got planned? Mr. Elzinga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff are happy to meet with Mr. Hildebrand and his group to get a better understanding of costs, timelines, and all of the logistics that we're talking about today, and potentially have something come forward previous to the entire cultural plan, but I can't commit to that at this point. I'm happy to meet with Mr. Hildebrand to discuss further.
I think there was an ask in there somewhere in the presentation that the municipal partners, North Cowichan and Duncan, be part of that discussion, so we'll take that as additional direction. So I think we have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? Director Wilson.
I'm assuming you're going to read that motion again, please, just for
So
clarity.
I would
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I would refer the presentation and this discussion to, I call it Mr. Elzinga's department, but
Community Services.
for consideration in conjunction with the planning for the cultural plan work.
And that's been seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. We have a couple of items of correspondence next. We're nearing about an hour. Anybody want a quick break? Okay, we'll return at 10:35. Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to turn to Ms. Ferguson for our first item. Could I have everyone take their seats, please? Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are on correspondence. C1 is correspondence from the Halalt First Nation, Cheminas River flood mitigation, and that's for information.
Any questions or discussion on this item? Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got some questions and I'm just asking, and I see that staff are here. Are we going to be discussing R7 again, or are we finished with that? Because these two tie in together here. I can make my comments now if you like, or...
I think since this is just an information item, that when R7 comes up following information, you can discuss it then.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion of this item? Director Nicholson. And I'm reminded to please make sure your microphones are a little bit closer, maybe not as close as Mr. Hildebrand's was, but a little bit closer.
Thank you. I was really, I really valued the comments from the public in our public input period, and having the Coax Isle has very similar issues to the Chemainus, and I think this is a hugely complicated issue. And I feel very lucky to be in the Coax Isle, that we have moved the dial a little bit and we're moving towards, people are paying attention and we're doing the work that we need to figure out a way forward to restore what is a hugely degraded system. The Chemainus isn't at that place, but I think whatever we can do, we should be doing. Whatever we can do to support moving in that direction, it would be helpful. There is no quick fix. The report was pretty clear about that. You do one thing, you create a problem somewhere else. So you really need to work with the natural system, and it's complicated because of private properties and all the rest of it, but it's something that needs to happen because it's only going to get worse.
Thank you, Director Nicholson. This is an information item. I'm sure comments in that can be discussed at when we bring R7 forward. And I'm just going to take the reins and go on to C2, which is 2023 UVCM Convention, and Ms. Miles Wilson is going to the lectern.
Good morning. So I've been asked to provide a brief summary of discussion from the EASC meeting last week regarding when this item was brought forward as correspondence there. We did have, so in summary, we need to submit our requests for ministers' meetings by June 30th. At the committee meeting, there was a discussion about some staff recommendations for potential meetings. There was also from committee a proposal that was to be brought forward today. So in summary, the staff recommendations are to request a meeting with Minister Ralston regarding the Stalking Lake Dam. So we have been in conversation with the town of Ladysmith regarding a joint meeting request. We did, as you recall, make a funding proposal for that dam project, and we were not successful. So we're needing to look for alternative resources for that very important project. We also are proposing, and there was some discussion at EASC about a request to Minister Heyman, the Minister of Environment, regarding the funding shortfall for the Cowichan Lake Weir project. So we have been in discussions with the Cowichan Watershed Board and Cowichan Tribes, and they've confirmed their chief's availability should we want to request a joint meeting for a minister's meeting for that. Minister or potentially the Premier as well would be a suggestion. Other options and proposals were potentially meeting with the Minister of Indigenous Relations to discuss potential expansion to the C2C program to support enhancement of reconciliation initiatives. And there was discussion about meeting with Minister of Finance regarding new fiscal framework for local governments. I believe that was Director Morrison who brought that up at committee. And staff are recommending as well, potentially requesting enhanced flexibility to the MRDT program to support affordable housing projects. Happy to answer any questions or expand on the discussion.
Director Stone.
I'm just going to put my support behind all of those requests. I think listening to the discussion at EAS about our experience at FCM, a new fiscal framework is front of mind for every municipality and local government across Canada, and it's so desperately needed that I think we need to renew the full court press at the local government level across the province, with the province, whether they're advocating with us to the federal government or delivering the funding we've been asking for 6 ways from Sunday, as long as I've been at these tables. I think the other issue, the Weir is obviously very present, but I think this conversation that we're having right now around flood management and mitigation is really important, because we've also had significant press on the provincial government around private managed forest land activities. And I know that, at least at a fundamental level, there's some understanding and agreement that all of these downstream impacts that we're experiencing do have a broader source base, including the logging and forestry management practices upstream. So I wouldn't mind kind of throwing that on the pile. I have a feeling this UBCM is going to be less sessions, more meetings if we're successful, but I know I'm willing to put my weight behind those meetings, and I know that with the team that we have at this table, if we have to sort of divide and conquer based on schedules, that we can definitely do that and just work with staff, not on staff, with staff, to just have really strong, focused, fact-based briefing notes that we can go into those meetings with to start building those conversations, because we know it's a 15-minute speed date, but what we want to do is get the next meeting in Victoria, and our advantage here is that we're 45 minutes away, as long as the highways are open. Or we can ride our bikes along the train tracks. Thanks.
I have directors, I think I saw Director McClinton put up his hand, Wilson and Douglas. Anyone else? Director McClinton.
Thank you, Chair. If you could just maybe elaborate a little bit, just getting, some questions from residents at Saltaire about the dam, just why the funding wasn't successful, and what those implications are, if that's possible. Yeah.
Through the chair, to Director McClinton. So the program that we applied for was oversubscribed. It's an infrastructure program, and there were just a lot of applications this round, as there usually are. So not getting into the details of the project too much, but we do need to replace it. So we need to find another source of funding. It's an important project. I can see Director Stone with his hand up, so he may want to comment further.
If it pleases the chair.
Director Stone, go ahead.
So yeah, the reality is that if we can't secure an additional source of funding, it'll end up coming out of our Growing Communities funds. And I don't think that we all know that those funds are well oversubscribed at the local levels, and we don't want to do that. I did as much investigation as I could into the projects that were awarded through the Strategic Priorities Fund, and I do recognize it was more than almost 6 times oversubscribed to the funding base, like so many programs right now. But I would have argued, and I did argue to the committee, that decided those grants that this was a much more critical infrastructure project than many that were awarded. That being said, we haven't been told to go away by the provincial government. We've written letters both from the CVRD and the town of Ladysmith, and I think that asking for a meeting with the minister and/or the premier is appropriate. Thanks.
Ms. Wilson?
Mr. Chair, just one additional comment is that, just for clarity, we have a 50% interest in this infrastructure and in the water license. So we're partners essentially with the town of Ladysmith and have equal responsibility.
Follow up?
Thank you, Chair. And just how might the Stamanis nations play into this? It's my understanding they'll be with us, and maybe Chair, Mayor Stone can speak to it. I think they are going to be invited to the meeting with the Premier?
Yeah,
Or,
so
sorry, with the Premier's office.
Yeah, it's on an agenda for our Not-so-Much committee locally, but as Stocking and Holland Lakes provide water not only to Area H, Area G, and Stamanis First Nation, where our goal is to have the chief join us in those meetings.
I've got Director Wilson next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Areas A, B, and C, as you know, are in the process of investigating the possibility of incorporation. And we would like, if possible, to arrange a meeting with either municipal affairs and/or finance, either or and, both of them, where all three of us would attend, and we would ask that you as CAO accompany us as well. Can we put that request in? And I'm not sure whether it would be financial or municipal affairs.
Through the chair, I believe that would be municipal affairs.
Okay.
As the ministry that would be responsible for funding and entertaining alternative governance requests.
Great, and if we could put that in, and if you'd be willing to attend that meeting as well, Danielle, that would be perfect.
I would be happy to.
Okie dokie, thank you.
Director Douglas? You're good? Director Stone?
Do we need a motion to make those meeting requests, or is this?
Through the chair, my proposal would be yes to put forward a motion, and also because they're due by the 30th, I would like to have direction to work with the chair and the committee chairs potentially on the wording for the meeting requests. And should we have those meetings, we would be then preparing briefing materials, which would come back.
So would a motion along the lines of that staff be directed to arrange meetings on the topics discussed at the committee meeting today, and that be approved at the board this afternoon? Moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Wilson. Director Douglas?
Quick question, Mr. Chair, and don't mean to offend any of my colleagues here, but with regards to the topic we've discussed many times about South Cowichan Incorporation, is the idea that the 3 area directors would approach this meeting to get information from the Minister of Municipal Affairs, recognizing that there has been quite a bit of debate around the table here, and that my sense is we don't at this time have a unified position as a board.
So I'm just going to wade in here for a second. I gather there's been correspondence to the ministry. Just the nature of these meetings, generally, you don't get answers to your questions when you go and pose them. So I think whether or not we have a cohesive approach as a board, the will of the directors for the area wanting to meet is I think fine. I don't even know if we'll even get a meeting on that sort of topic at UBCM. So we'll put in the request, see what happens. I would be surprised if they were to grant a meeting on that topic, given we're so close. So with that, I'll go on to, do you have a
I think
follow-up?
that's clear. It's more to get information. If there's, I can see nodding from Director Wilson, more to get information on how this process would work, and yeah.
Go ahead, Director Wilson.
Thank you very much. Yes. And basically, we have had meetings before. I attended one with Director Salmon when he was here. But at that meeting at the time, Director Acton wasn't available, so it was only the two of us, and we also have a new director here as well. So basically, it's to catch up, say, okay, we got some money, can we have a bit more? And this is a desktop right now. We're looking at what we got. Let's get the information so that we're all clear on it.
Director Stone?
I'm good. I'm good.
He's
Director
good?
Wilson nailed it.
All right. What about the West Cowichan Incorporation study? There we go. So there is a motion on the floor. Is everyone clear on what we're going to vote for? I don't see anybody saying no, so I'll call a question. All in favor? Any opposed? Unopposed, the motion carries. Ms. Ferguson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we have amended our agenda, so we were at so R7 is going to be put forward to R1, and so that is a report from Environmental Services Division, Reshuminis River Flood Management.
Mr. Moore? No presentation. Okay, let's try and refocus here. I saw Director Stone put up his hand, and Ms. Ferguson wants to read a resolution. Do you want to go first, Director Stone?
I just wanted to get on the speakers list after the presentation from Mr. Moore.
Okay, so we have a presentation. We've got two directors want to be on the speakers list. Can you hold off until we've had a presentation? Okay, so. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you, directors. And today I'm talking about the Lower Chemainus Watershed Flood Management Plan. This is a report that we received from Northwest Hydraulic Consultants. I'll be talking about that. I'd like to start by thanking the other partners that we had in this project. We worked very closely with Halalt and Penelakut First Nations and with North Cowichan. They were part of the technical advisory group and really supported the project. And also thanking Mr. James and Mr. Allingham and the local residents who also participated in that and shared a lot of their input, which was really valuable for the process. So it was a lot of people involved in this. Oops. Okay, so start off the study area, just so that everyone's familiar with this area. It's the Lower Chemainus River and portions of Bonsall and Whitehouse Creek, because the floodwaters from all three of these systems intermingle on the floodplain. So most of the land within that is within municipality of North Cowichan. We've also got Halalt First Nation. The Tussey Reserve, part of Penelakut, is down there at the near the estuary, and Stumanis First Nation also has a couple of reserves within the study area. The overview of the project, there was a couple of phases. The first part was on the floodplain mapping, so studying the area and getting a real good understanding of the flooding within the area. I presented that material to the committee in January, so I'm not going to go into a lot of details with that. And then phase two was to take the results to the community, to get some feedback, and to look at some solutions to the problem. So this report is presenting what we've got from that. So the first phase, like I said, came out with a report, and it came out with a designated floodplain map. So we've got three products. We've got maps which show the expected depth and velocity of the floodwater, so that describes the hazard. We've got designated floodplain maps which are designed to be regulatory, saying that any buildings constructed should be at this height to be safe from the expected floodwaters, and then a geomorphic hazard map that looks at erosion and other risks associated with it. We received that report last spring from the consultants, and then we took that to the community. We had a couple of public meetings, one here in Crofton that's pictured there, one at Halalt First Nation. They were kind enough to host us, and then a technical working group. Presented the results and tried to get some feedback from folks that are involved in that about what they thought of how accurately this has captured the flooding that they've experienced, and also what some solutions were to that. And we had some really good participation. We got some ideas from that. And then what the consultants did with that is they took the ideas that were presented to that meeting, they took their expert opinion, and they came up with a bunch of different floodplain management strategies. These ones are presented here. The first three that are there are non-structural. So these are things that aren't really intervening directly on the landscape to affect the where the floodwaters travel. It's more how the community deals with the floodwaters, trying to do things to make ourselves more resilient and to reduce the impacts that are associated with the flooding. And then the last one is the structural mitigation options, which are some of the more traditional things we think of when we think about flood management. So dikes and berms and flood channels and things like that. So they looked at a series of different flood mitigation options here on the Chemainus, and they're shown here. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the area, but the main, you can see the highway running north-south through the floodplain, and then the other line that runs north-south is basically the ENN rail line that goes through there. So the options they looked at were a couple of dikes. Marked number 1 on the map is a dike upstream of the highway bridge. So during a flood, a significant portion of the water spills out of the river upstream, goes through Russell Farms and the fish hatchery, and then eventually spills across the highway. So that cuts off the highway, and then those waters spill back again towards Halalt. So a dike there would protect that area. Number 2 was a dike that continues downstream from the highway, all the way from the highway bridge to the Chemainus Road Bridge. So again, it's going to protect the communities to the south of that. Option 3 that they looked at was removing the ENN rail line. The idea is during a flood, a lot of some of the water is trapped against the rail line, and that acts as a dike, basically trapping the waters on the Halalt side so it doesn't spread out across the rest of the floodplain the way it might if that wasn't there. And some of you will recall that there's been some culverts installed to try to look at that. The fourth one was a series of ring dikes. So they're cross-hatched orange on the map there. So smaller ring dikes around the Halalt community and around Tussey Road and also around Russell Farms and some of the houses there. So these are dikes that you're looking at what the effect of protecting some of the most vulnerable areas. And then the fifth one, in terms of structural mitigation, that's the dotted pink line on the map, is clearing out the channel. So looking at removing the sediments from a portion of the channel there, which is basically below the canyon where the accumulation really starts. Yeah, definitely they didn't look at going all the way to the estuary with that. So that's something we can talk about. And then the next step was they used the hydraulic model. So for each of those structural mitigation options, they basically ran the flood model with the dikes in place and without, and took a look at what the difference is. So this is an example with if you put the dikes in for dikes 1 and 2, basically all along the south bank of the river, you can see that good portions of the floodplain there would be protected. The map on the left shows where the floodwaters would be, but the map on the right is a comparison between the depth of the water with and without the dikes. So anything that's blue means the water is going to be lower there, but anything that's red means that the water is going to be deeper there. So you can see very clearly that what those dikes would do would be to transfer the flood risk from one portion of the floodplain to the other. So yes, you're reducing the water level by 1.7, 1.8 meters in locations, but on the other side, you're increasing increasing it by a similar amount or even more. So that transference of risk is one of the criteria that was put in place to evaluate these options, that if we're essentially making things worse for a bunch of people on the floodplain, then this option isn't one that should proceed. The costs of this was, a ballpark of $24 million as well, and we're talking dikes upwards of 3 meters, in some cases up to 5 meters high along the river, which really affects the community's relationship with the river and how you interact with it. So just to be clear, these dike options were considered and they've been rejected as not a solution for this floodplain. And they did this kind of analysis with all of those structural mitigation options, and that's all presented in the report. And then the other thing that they did for the structural and the non-structural options, they looked at the no adverse impact, then they looked at the SWOT analysis, so the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We looked at stakeholder and public input on these options, and then the consultants gave rankings and scores based on a number of criteria. And those the details of those can change depending on opinions, but the clear message came out that there was a number of different strategies that really aren't going to fix the problem, and then there's a number that are probably going to help things. There's no big easy fix for this. We didn't find a solution that you can put dikes all along the river and that'll fix all the problems. That's not something that's happened here. So the options, they came up with 5 recommended options to look at pursuing. So the first one is land use management. So this is more of a long-term picture. So the flood bylaws, making sure that future developments take what we know about the flooding into account, build in locations that are safer, raise buildings up to a safe height, look at subdivision, make sure that covenants are established, engineering reports are done. The next one is emergency response. So this has a lot of pieces, but just looking at ways that we can better prepare for flooding within the floodplain. So it's trying to give people more warning about it. It's getting temporary flood measures in place, so making sure the sandbags and tiger dams and other barriers are located fairly close to the river where they can be accessed if they're needed. Looking at evacuation routes, so using some of the modeling to see what are the trigger points that we can see, okay, this road's going to be cut off at this time, when do we need to start evacuating, what can be done with notifying people, and trying to better prepare the community in that way. The next option that they recommended is permanent flood proofing. So in most cases, this would be raising houses up to that flood construction level. So some of this is already being done on Halalt Reserve by Indigenous Services Canada. So that can be an option for a more permanent solution is getting the buildings up. And that protects the buildings. It doesn't necessarily prevent or ensure that you've still got access to your property. The ring dikes, the small ring dikes around individual houses have probably less utility in this area. And then temporary flood proofing. So there's sandbags. We've seen those HESCO blocks in the bottom left there. Those are in place. If you drive through the Westholme Halalt community, you'll see a lot of the houses are protected by these temporary flood measures. For a couple of years now. These things definitely do have utility in some parts of the floodplain and against some floods. In a lot of cases, though, where the floodwaters can be upwards of 2 meters deep, that overwhelms the ability of some of these temporary measures. So they're not a solution. You can stack some of them like the tiger dams, but some solutions there. And then the last one is the channel management. So out of all the structural mitigation options, the only one that's recommended at all is channel management. So looking at removal of gravel and log jams. The big thing why this one doesn't score higher is on the 1 in 200 year flood, it doesn't really make a huge difference. It's reducing water levels by 0.2 meters in certain locations. So it's not fixing everything, but that's at the 1 to 200 year flood. So when the floodwaters are filling the whole valley, taking some gravel out of one part isn't going to solve the problem. But that doesn't take into account the smaller floods, the ones that we get every couple of years, every 5 years, every 10 years. So in that case, there's not as much water, so there might be a lot more benefit to clearing out the gravel from the channels, as we keep hearing from the local community. In a natural system, the river deposits the gravel in one place and then it moves. The channel moves around, but we've constrained the river so it can't do that. We've developed, like in most communities, along the river, so we're trying to constrain it. So there is this gravel coming down that needs to be managed. So that's I think a lot of the focus of future efforts. So NHC, they've got those 5 recommended options. They summarized their recommendations to adopt a mix of these flood mitigation strategies, primarily the non-structural ones. So the land use, emergency preparedness, permanent flood proofing moving forward, and then also gravel removal, so looking at a long-term sediment management strategy. The province has just released a study that they've done looking at sediment sources in the upper Chemainus, so that was sort of the first piece. So they found where a lot of the sediment's coming from. They can start looking at volumes, and then for the sediment, because it's going to have to be taken out year after year, or every few years. So looking at a strategy for that, seeing how much gravel's coming down, and what are the impacts of removing it. And it also has to take into account fisheries, because obviously there's implications to spawning. It only can be done at certain times of the year. There's successes in the Cowichan that we can look to for that. So, but again, this isn't going to solve the 1 in 200 year flood. It is something to keep in mind. And then the additional recommendations that we're putting forward as staff is we've got the hydraulic model that NHC prepared for us. So that's a big asset that we can use, and we've already got requests from the province that's looking at some of this sediment removal to use that model to be able to show, if we clear out these channels, it will have these benefits we can expect at a 1 in 5 year flood or a 1 in 10 year flood. And we can hopefully take some action on that. The other one is to expand our memorandum of understanding with North Cowichan and Halalt to work towards a watershed-based plan for this, recognizing that this plan looked just at the floodplain. We know the sediment's coming from upstream. We know that land use over the decades has changed the hydrograph for the region in terms of how quickly the water that falls on the landscape moves into that river. We see the increasing flashiness of the system. So looking at the bigger picture there, and also getting out, the last recommendation is getting out and presenting this result back to the community and sharing what solutions there are and what challenges there still are associated with flood management in this. So I believe there are going to be some questions.
Let me just create the list here. And I'm just going to take chair's prerogative and ask a real quick question, because this is something that was brought up by the public input folks. Gravel removal cost recovery. I always thought that this is a valuable resource. There must be some value to it, but my understanding is that it's a net cost to remove gravel. There's not as much value as we might think in the end product that's removed. Do you have any sort of cents on a dollar or idea of what the cost of recovering, whether it be per cubic meter or truckload? Any thoughts on that?
I don't have the details on that. I think it depends a lot how far you're transporting the gravel that you remove. I know there's certainly demand within the region for gravel, so there's some value associated with it. So it's not going to entirely be a cost.
Thank you. Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mr. Moore. Good report. Thank you for making it so clear. But as we heard from the delegation this morning, Mr. James asked, why is this not going all the way through the estuary? And you reinforced it with your, you got a problem?
Well, I thought that Director Stone and myself were first on the list. We did actually...
Point of order.
Well, that would have been a point of order on his part.
If he called it.
I I stand corrected. I've got Stone, Wilson, and then Director Abbott on here. I just started two different lists,
I'm
so
willing to cede my spot to Director Abbott to finish his comments.
please proceed.
Thank you, fellow directors. Your report indicated a dashed line of channel management, but does not go, as you concede, all the way to the estuary. Can you explain why?
Yeah, a couple of reasons. That dashed line, these were concepts that they looked at in terms of if we removed a certain volume of material, what would that look like in the big picture? To actually move to the next step of doing the gravel removal, they'd look much more specifically at certain sites within that reach of the river. There's gravel bars and then there's pools, and it's quite varied along there. So it would only be certain sites. As far as continuing it downstream, the benefits become a little bit less there, is my understanding, that downstream of the Chemainus River Bridge, the whole system is much more tidally influenced. So yes, there's a benefit. If you clear out the channel at low tide, the water can move out. At high tide, those channels are going to be filled, whether they're this deep or whether they're this deep, so you don't get the benefits. So I think to some extent it's concentrating the benefits where you would get the maximum value from it. I do think it's something that can be modeled. Are there other opportunities? We've talked a lot, once getting into the specifics, there's a gravel bar in between the rail bridge and the Chemainus Road Bridge that is one of the locations where gravel's been removed in the past, and certainly is a target again. Below that, you start getting past Mr. Alliham's farm there. There's log jams as well, which were blocking the channels, and as he indicated, the river actually many years ago used to discharge out into the Chemainus Harbor. So some of those will take more study in terms of the fish habitat benefits of some of those log jams and just where it can be done. But
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm going to beg everyone's indulgence to perhaps keep your questions to one and a follow-up. We've got more than half the committee wanting to wade in on this one, and we have a board meeting at 1:30. I'll go to Director Stone next.
Wade in, I like the pun. You would want to wade in there in the winter. Yeah, and I think that the people, our folks here that spoke during public input, it doesn't take much investigation to see how upstream land use practices are affecting it. And when we say land use practices, I'm talking about forestry practices. The steep slopes that contribute to the Chemainus watershed, at least in Google Maps, and it's usually a bit outdated or quite bald. And the impacts, and again, I'm not a professional, so there's professionals around this room or in the consulting base, but it just seems to stand to reason that these practices impact the carrying capacity of the slopes that contribute to the runoff, and it's that rush of water that's not being contained within the land base that contributes to this as well. So I did see right at the end of your presentation wanting to have a conversation about expanding the MOU to look at sort of upstream land use practices and how they're contributing into it, because we're not changing climate change, so those heavier rains are going to come. We can talk about, sort of hard mitigative strategies, gravel removals, et cetera, which will have some benefit to those, 1 in 20 year floods. But most concerning to me is that we never seem to be able to get through to the province or the federal government that the practices upstream of where these crises happen are probably the biggest benchmark to changing it. And I'm only speaking from small scale experience, but even in our communities, when you have that development outside of the SPIA, outside of the riparian zone, but you see that runoff come through, how it can overwhelm the hard infrastructure, and then next thing you know, you're getting flows in the creeks and the rivers that you've never seen before. Multiply that by the climate change impacts, and you have an unmanageable 200-year flood situation in the lower areas that impact the farms and things that we're all trying to protect and value. So I guess the question is that does, just outside of this, does that sort of expansion of the MOU to look at land use practices and stuff really focus on forestry management practices and the impacts on the overall systems?
Mr. Moore.
Yeah, I think that would have to be a big part of it, in looking at how the flows have changed for over time. The work that the province just did looked specifically at sediment sources, so the network of logging roads, and especially how logging roads prior to around 2000, 2005, when new regulations came into effect, are still out there on the landscape and even haven't been deactivated effectively. So there's a lot of historic impacts that we're still going to be feeling for a long time. So it's beyond just the current forestry practices as well. So I think the impacts are coming up from up there. So we have to look at as much as we can, and as you know, there might be some hope, as Director Nicholson referenced in the Cook-Sila, a unique feature there is that their process is looking at forestry practices.
Director Stone?
Yeah, and just the last comment I have is that it's not just the roads. Like, you can go into a mature established forest, can be second growth, but mature established, and you look at how the understory sort of absorbs rain and releases it in a more sort of orderly fashion versus where these clear cuts are. It takes decades to restore that understory. So even though the trees can be mature, you can be walking through a forest, you can be walking through a crunchy understory that just doesn't have the ability to hold and retain water, and then it runs down the steep slopes. And if you look at the cut blocks within these logged areas, they're on the steepest slopes that contribute directly into the Chemainus River, and then, you know, we have a sort of an unmanageable flood situation downstream. So hopefully we can get traction with the province around forestry management practices. I'm a big forestry supporter, always will be, but there are a little bit of changes that could be made that I think would help.
Thank you. I've got Director Wilson, followed by, Director Abbott's had his crack at this. Director Douglas. Director Wilson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jeff. Good stuff. And we did have some conversations earlier on. And the thing that comes out most, I'm a simple person, and it seems to me that we've neglected these streams, these drainage ditches, call them what you like, the rivers, over many, many years, and now we have a plug system. And the only way to get some kind of mitigation is to unplug those systems. The same as a marine background where we dredge the main channels, otherwise everything's going to get blocked up. So the key words here, as far as I can see, is consider the entire watershed, not just the floodplain. Is that what we're going to be doing in the future, considering that whole thing? And then stewardship and restoration of streams and other drainage avenues. I think you come down to channel management. This, to me, is the only way to go right now. It is the most expensive one. I think you and I spoke about this, removal of gravel. But basically we're planning for the 1 in 200 year, and we're forgetting about the other 199. So let's plan for those as well. So any comments on that? And I know you've covered a lot of it already, but I would like to see a lot more of the drainage systems, the streams, the arteries there, and then the capillaries that go with it are made clearer so that we can then get the salmon coming back up again. They're not getting stuck on where the gravel is. Does that make sense to you? And there is a question in there somewhere, I'm sure.
Through the chair to Director Wilson. I think you make a lot of excellent points. The system has changed from what the natural conditions are, where there was a balance of the sediment that was brought down would be deposited and the river would move around, and there was a balance to that, and that's been disrupted from land use and climate change and constraining the river within the channel. So we're left with needing to manage the sediment that's there. I definitely agree with you. The focus of NHC's work was the 1 in 200 year design flood. That's what we're mandated, it's the standard practice to design things for that. So they were tasked with trying to find solutions to protecting against the 1 in 200 year flood. And what we heard is that's extremely difficult. That doesn't in any way mean that we should ignore the smaller floods. And I think that's where we can have a bigger influence, and the gravel is one big part of that. It does have to look at the whole watershed, like I said, to figure out where it's coming from, how much is coming. Does it make more sense to try to stop it in the upper or middle of the watershed rather than in the lower part? Or does it make sense to make plans for removing it in the lower portion so that the flows are there? Being very careful with our understanding of the ecology of the system is changing, that we understand better how to clear the gravel out in such a way that the river can still have connections to the floodplain and we can still maintain the flood habitat. Because the last thing we want is a channel that's really deeply incised and the water just blasts through there and the fish can't get to any of the habitat that they need in the side channels. So
I'm just going to beg the committee's indulgence in that we have 9 more people on the speakers list, and given maybe 5 minutes for preamble, question, and response from Mr. Moore, we'll be well into the lunch hour, and this is the first of our staff reports. So I would ask you to be concise, shorten your preambles, and Mr. Moore, you know what I'm asking of you. Director Douglas.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I have a question and then a related suggestion for the recommendation. The question with regards to the gravel removal, the report from the consultant, the last recommendation reads, initiate technical and environmental studies to prepare a long-term channel gravel removal and channel management program, which sounds fine, but it's talking about a long-term project and more studies, which are going to cost money, and inevitably these things take a long time. Whereas, as we've heard from you and folks in the area, there's a desire for some immediate action, hopefully before the next flooding this fall and winter. I wonder if you can comment on that. If it's an either or, we can do both. We can plan for these, have these long-term plans and studies about gravel removal while at the same time taking immediate action. And interested in your response. And then I have a suggestion I want to throw out there in terms of the recommendation to capture some of that.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair to Director Douglas. I think it's not an either or. I think we do know enough from the work. There's a task force that's the province and Halalt and North Cowichan, and we're involved in that too, and Penelakut, that's still dealing with the aftermath of the November 15th atmospheric river. So they're the ones that cleared out the gravel immediately below the highway bridge, and they're looking at coordinating the other gravel removal and bank protection projects. So I think we know enough to be moving forward with those things. Those are underway. They've approached us to use the model for that. That'll help right now. At the same time, we also need the longer term plan so that we know how often are we going to have to come back and remove that gravel, and are these the best spots, or are there others?
Your suggestion?
My suggestion, Mr. Chair, would be to move the recommendation, however, for point 2, to simply add the wording after Chemainus River Flood Management Plan, comma, including prioritize gravel removal as an immediate action, which I think is consistent with work already underway and consistent with what Mr. Moore has just said.
Ms. Ferguson, how would you like to handle that? Would you like a motion put on the floor and that amended, or would you be comfortable with us moving that with that additional wording?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there's no motion on the floor, so you can amend it how you wish.
Are you wanting to move that now? I've got a seconder at the end there.
Happy to.
We have a mover and a seconder, so I'm going to proceed with the list as I have it here, and we have a motion on the floor. Everyone's clear on what it is. I'll go to Director McClinton next.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to keep it really long for you.
Well done.
I grew up on this river. It's my family's favorite spot to swim. I swim through it year-round, except for when it's going pretty fast, at least once a week. So kind of two questions. I guess just the point around the logs and the trees in there. There's, my question is gonna be, have people walked the river, spent time on it? I mean, there's thousands upon thousands of cut trees that are piled up in all sorts of places. So I think, some local knowledge involved in that, and I'll get to my question, but I'd want to maybe add that to the motion, that's part of the gravel removal, because I think that's a contributing factor. It changes significantly from year to year, the river. So I guess that's my comment. I'll leave it there. And then just the last part, it seems to me where the bridge is, the Chemainus Bridge, the biggest sort of thing you notice is the river's moved dramatically, maybe 30, 40 feet to the south from where it used to be. I mean, do we have any historical knowledge around, the flooding after the bridge was put in? It seems to me where that's most of the flooding starts, or maybe it's just a coincidence. So that's hopefully that question.
Mr. Moore?
Thanks. Through the chair to Director McClinton. Yeah, I think it's essential to have the local knowledge in that, and Halolt's working quite closely with those plans and have quite a bit of that understanding of the system and the changes, and we've also heard that input from the community. In terms of the other uses of the river and things, I think it's it's really important. Sorry, I'm losing my track here. Could you repeat the second part of your question?
So just where the bridge is, moving towards Chemainus, and then, it's clear to see the riverbed has moved dramatically 50, 60 feet, somewhere in that range to the south,
Yeah, sorry. So, we do have the, in the geomorphic atlas that was done in the first part, they've looked at the historic channel movements, and there's a couple of side channels that go through Halault Reserve there, and there's quite a concern of the river avulsing and going through those channels again, which would really threaten Halault. So some of the emergency works focused around that. The channel that was dug was precisely to take pressure off that bank. And there's also plans, and this is where the Halault letter comes in terms of the funding, is to armor that bank to prevent the erosion there, because it's quite a concern.
Director Nicholson, myself, and Manhouse. Very quick, and it doesn't necessarily pertain to the resolution on the floor, but there's clearly been a lot of work done on the restoration of estuaries and low-lying areas for creating enhanced absorption and mitigation, I guess, in regards to these major events, not necessarily happening here, but maybe in Cowichan Bay. Has there been any serious look at that rehabilitating the natural systems within there, or is that something that may happen down the road? Like this looks mainly reactive, except for the hardening of what's not recommended. So what about the natural restoration of the ability to respond? And I realize climate change may have tossed that all out the window.
Yeah, thank you. There hasn't been as much discussion of that as a solution. We definitely heard about changes in the estuary, and a lot of that may be connected to things like the log sort at Shoal Island and disrupting currents through there. We hear from Halault how they used to be able to walk out to the islands there, and now there's so much fine sediment that you just sink up to your knees in the slop. So I'm not sure what the opportunities are there in terms of how you get a lot of flood mitigation benefits there. I don't think it's been explored in much depth.
Fair enough, thank you. On to Director Manhouse, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Douglas already mentioned what I was going to say regarding more studies and not immediate relief for Mr. Allingham and Mr. James and others in that area. I totally support this this motion with the removal of the gravel and debris, so I'm totally on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Manhouse. Director Toporowski.
Thank you, Chair. I thought you forgot about me. That's why I was waving at you. Thank you. Thank you for the report. As said in public input, they lived on the river. My spouse's families lived there at the end of Mount Sicker Road, and seen the changes over the years of the river. And again, due to natural on top of unnatural things happening upstream, I think that's another thing that the director next to me here mentioned about the effects of what happens upstream and on the hills. And it was mentioned at the Crofton town hall meeting that they had with the other people there that for input about the river and talking about the flooding and all sorts of different things. And we heard from farmers and their concerns about their piece of property eroding and the erosion from the cliffs, which cause more velocity coming down to the end. And I think the other thing too about the gravel removal, the Cowichan tribes, you know, with their gravel removal, and they're continuing to fight with the small window that DFO gives to them. It's really nice to see that this is going to be a collaborated effort with the nation too, because they need that support in getting the log jam removed and the sediment, which again will be a short-term solution to what's happening. And the spawning fish, like I took a drive there when the fish were coming up the river, right at, you know, they used to make it past the Green Bridge. Now they're not making it past even the other bridge. Whoops, now I'm hitting my microphone. But where the log jam happens right down on Chemainus Road, they were starting to spawn there, and drove past there last week, and there is a sandy sediment beach where people were sitting there, going, you know, being able to go swimming right there, but I don't know how deep the water was, but I was thinking probably have to lie in the river soon because it's gonna go so low. So there's just the part about the small window with DFO, trying to get those, I like the motion where you're gonna be working together with doing that. And also the concerns of the public input because of what we did at the Cowichan River with diking and how the water moves. So it's unnatural, and that was another thing that, you know, trying to protect one area will affect another area. So those are just some of the concerns that I, from experience of watching the water flows and whatnot down in Cowichan is just a concern. So I will keep it short, thanks.
Any comment, Mr. Moore?
Thank you.
Director Staples.
Thank you. So just a couple of things. One, to sort of touch on what Chair Morrison was speaking to around the restoration. I didn't see that in, and I'm hoping that does come later, because this is reactive, as I recognize that it needs to be at this time because of the imminence of it. But that is something that I'd like to see a lot more in the future, is trying to restore as much of it as we can. I know that there's a lot of successful projects taking place on the Cowichan River. And so just to add that, my question, and I'm not sure if it's more of a question or a comment or if it's combined, is that in terms of cost recovery, what's happening upstream, one of the things that I think that the regional district should mention to the province when we have these discussions, and that should be part of this discussion, is looking at cost recovery from the foresters that have actually caused the issues upstream. And so, you know, if this is an ongoing issue and we're having to now dredge the river, there should be some form of taxation that can actually go towards not only restoration but dredging. So I'm not sure if that would be part of a discussion with the minister moving forward, or if that's something separate we can discuss, not necessarily with this plan, but I do really believe that we have to have that as an action point at some time, because this should not fall onto any level of government solely. It should also fall onto the creators of a good portion of this challenge.
Mr. Moore?
Yeah, through the chair to Director Staples, again, I think those are some really good ideas. I'm not familiar with enough of the legislative requirements for what sort of mechanisms are available to local governments to make those kind of changes with the private managed forest land, but it's certainly an interesting concept, and I think some of the links between land use and these types of changes on the landscape are fairly clear.
To me, that sounded like a unique enough approach to maybe contemplate a UBCM resolution direct to the convention this fall. I don't know, just food for thought. I think it's a June 30th deadline for resolutions. We have a resolution on the floor. Oh, Director Douglas?
No new comments. Chair, just a question. Director McClinton and Toporowski mentioned the log jams, and I'm wondering if, turn to Mr. Moore, would there be any issue with us, like I take it as a friendly amendment to add that to the original amendment to point to say, and prioritize gravel and log jam removal as an immediate action.
So might I suggest that we probably don't have to be this prescriptive? I think I've heard Mr. Moore say that there's already identified sites and the like, so I could make a ruling on that, but any thoughts? Is that not incorporated in the work that's contemplated?
Yeah, and I've seen terms like the channel management or debris removal as trying to be more encompassing of more than just the gravel.
So you're suggesting that maybe channel management instead of gravel removal might be a more appropriate word for this resolution? Debris
or
management.
debris management could be broader.
Okay, so we don't do friendly amendments. Would you like to amend the resolution?
It's just nice to have that gravel removal reference specifically. And I'm not helping right now, but.
Director McGonigal.
Thank you very much. I will support the motion saying gravel/debris removal.
There you go.
Okay, so you've just amended the resolution on the floor. Is there a seconder? We have a seconder. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment? Any opposed? None opposed. Shall we go straight to the resolution? All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. I didn't even have you read it. Director Staples.
So would this be the time then to make a motion to direct staff to, because we don't have any meetings before the June 30th deadline that I'm aware of, or maybe we do. We do have one more meeting. So would this be the appropriate time to direct staff to come back with a resolution for UBCM related to the taxation?
I don't see our
No,
CEO
I
in the
don't
room,
either.
but I think it'd be brilliant.
So could I make that resolution?
Please do. Seconded
Okay.
by Director Stone. Can you expand on what the resolution would sort of read like?
Vaguely, cost recovery from, forest companies. But that's not what I said earlier. I said it better
It
earlier.
was much more eloquent
I
when
know,
you said
it was,
earlier.
but.
We just reviewed the tape.
Yes.
Roll it back.
Okay, well, let's first see if everybody is understanding what the nature of the resolution is.
It's essentially, as I was saying before, to look at ways to do, to talk to the government about some sort of form of taxation, perhaps, or way of cost recovery from the causal industries of the sediment buildup in the river.
I totally get what you're saying. Does everybody else around the table understand what the nature of the resolution is? I got a thumbs up and some nodding, and it's been duly seconded. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. We got to crack on to our next item, which is, and she's been so patient, Ms. Dent. Ms. Ferguson. Oh, look at Mr. O'Riordan's popped up.
R2 is a report from the Economic Development Division, Agricultural Land Matching Program Support, 2024 to 2026.
Welcome.
Thank you.
just to provide an introduction. The purpose of this report is to provide information on the Young Agrarian BC Land Match Program, which is being supported by the CVRD. So the report will be accompanied by a PowerPoint presentation from Sarah Dent from the Young Agrarians BC, who's their executive director and co-founder, as well as her colleague Darcy Smith. So Sarah and Darcy will speak to the work that they're doing with the Land Match program in Cowichan, as well as speak to a request for renewed funding from the CVRD for 2024 to 2026. And as you can see in the report, staff are supportive of this request and are recommending that a request for funding be considered as part of the 2024 budget process. With that, I'll hand it over to Sarah, hoping that she's still in the lobby. She's attending virtually with Darcy. Over to you, Sarah and Darcy.
Thank you so much, Barry. It's Darcy Smith here, and Sarah unfortunately had another commitment that she couldn't avoid late this morning. So you've just got me, but Sarah is on the phone listening. I'm going to, I think, attempt to share my screen now for the presentation. Bear with me one moment here. Oh. I'll be right back. I have to change a setting on my computer in order to share the presentation. Unfortunately, my sincere apologies. I wasn't expecting to be sharing. So is that okay if I jump off and jump right back on in 10 seconds?
Do what you need to do.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hopefully that was fairly seamless for everybody. And I will now share my screen. Hey, thank you, Barry, for the introduction and for the support of our work over the years from the CVRD and from Economic Development Cowichan. Young Agrarians is an educational resource network for new and young farmers. I'm Darcy Smith. I'm the manager of the BC Land Matching Program. I've been with Young Agrarians since 2016, doing this land access work. The reason Young Agrarians exists is because of the low number of people farming in Canada. Just 23,000 farm operators under 35 are farming today, and we've lost 20% of our farms in BC since 2011. So our program really works to create farm renewal, which is key to future food security. I think especially on Vancouver Island, there's a real awareness of the need for a resilient local food system. And we do this by offering farmer-to-farmer programming to grow the next generation of farmers, primarily with programs in Western Canada with a national network of farmers and collaborating organizations. Our programs are online engagement, so collecting resources and sharing stories. We've got a really robust social network online, doing educational events on and off farm to connect farmers with each other for mentorship, and learning. We've got an on-farm apprenticeship training in the prairies, and in BC, of course, land access and transition, which we'll spend much more time talking about today, and then business mentorships for farmers in startup, connecting them with a farmer mentor to help them further develop their business. In 2022, Young Agrarians worked with 2,000 farmers, 1,600 farms, 630 landholders, and collaborated with 260 organizations to further the mission of growing new farmers. The BC Land Matching Program comes out of the really essential need for land access support. It's again and again the #1 challenge identified by new farmers as they are trying to start farms, along with knowledge and capital. I don't think I need to tell anyone on Vancouver Island how expensive farmland is, but it's a real barrier to entry for people starting farms. And land sharing, land leasing, other ways of alternative land access is an entry point for new farmers. Young Agrarians started doing land access work in 2013, and then in 2016 launched a pilot land matching program in Metro Vancouver, based on a program from Quebec called L'Alter. We expanded that program across southern BC, including Vancouver Island, with the support of the CVRD in 2018, and over the last 5 years have been growing the program, building momentum, and successfully matching farmers. And the model is hands-on, one-on-one support for farmers and landholders to assess their vision, their business plans, their land, make introductions, and when there's a spark, support the development of agreements as a neutral third party. We are so appreciative to the funders. The program is funded by the province of British Columbia and then supported regionally by Cowichan Valley Regional District, and in other regions, Columbia Basin Trust, Bullet Foundation, and the Real Estate Foundation of BC. Just a quick look at some exciting numbers, some results from the program. We've made 277 matches, mostly since 2018, on more than 10,000 acres, and interacted with more than 6,000 landholders and farmers across the province. Just an indication of how much interest and need there is for this type of land access support. On Vancouver Island, which is our busiest land matching region, we are at 84 land matches on more than 305 acres, and almost 2,000 people engaged with since 2018. A little deeper dive into Vancouver Island and the Cowichan Valley. The Vancouver Island, I mentioned, is our busiest land matching region. As one of 5 regions, it is 30% of our total inquiries and matches. So a lot of interest from farmers, especially in starting farms on Vancouver Island. Specific to the Cowichan Valley, we have had 22 matches on 80 acres. And the Cowichan Valley matches represent more than a quarter of Vancouver Island matches, as well as matched acres, and then just about 10% of BC-wide matches. When we have a regional funder like the Cowichan Valley Regional District, that enables us to focus more of our land matchers' energies in a region in terms of outreach, marketing, and prioritizing matches in that area. So that's where these great numbers in the CVRD are coming from. A little success story in Cowichan. This is a blueberry farm where the landholders were seeking to transition to new operators. Charles and Manzar pictured here were able to find this opportunity through the BC Land Matching Program and negotiate an agreement that includes housing, taking over the existing farm operations, and adding their own operations as well to grow the business. And they really felt like the support of the land matching program made a difference for them between being able to farm and get going on the island and not. Another success story, a market garden, a story of someone local to the region who was gardening and really wanted to take that next step, but feeling a bit daunted by leasing land, starting a business. So the support of the land matcher to facilitate that process for Celeste enabled her to grow from a hobby gardener into a farmer selling at the market. According to the Ontario Fair Finance Fund, farms have the biggest economic impact on local communities versus any other industry. So just wanting to highlight the economic impact of starting these new farms through the BC Land Matching Program. There's a multiplier effect of 1.6 to 3 times for all revenue generated back into the local community. So if we estimate that a farm will earn $10,000 in revenue in year 1, you can see some of the numbers. These matches start to stack up in terms of the economic impact that they provide to the Cowichan Valley. And in this one case story in Mill Bay, for a farm that had in 2021 $165,000 in gross revenue, you can see that in that year alone, the multiplier effect means more than $250,000 to $500,000 in economic impact. And we'll see these farms grow year over year and increase their impact. Young Agrarians hosts events to educate and network people around land access. We've been doing online land forums with COVID, but now we're excited this fall to host an in-person land linking workshop in the Cowichan Valley. Great opportunity to gather landholders and land seekers together. And this is just a snapshot of some of the on-farm events we've hosted in the Cowichan Valley over the last few years around land access on farms matched through the program. Into what is coming next for the BC Land Matching Program. So I think we've been hearing a lot about climate change over this morning, and that is impacting farmers as well. So there's definitely a intensification of the on-the-ground challenges that farmers are facing around climate change and weather, also around inflation, the rising cost of inputs, insurance, access to slaughter. All of these things make farm startup more challenging. As well, there's a labor and new farmer shortage in agriculture that's national in scope, and housing shortages both in the Cowichan Valley and across BC. In terms of what Young Agrarians is looking forward to doing next and some potential opportunities in the Cowichan Valley, I mentioned events. We're keen to do some of those this year. We're also exploring we're partnering with VIU on a Cowichan-based farmer training program to address that need to get new farmers trained and ready to access land. Just a note of perhaps curiosity for a future conversation about housing in the CVRD for farmers. And then really we're continuing to build our inventory of quality land opportunities. We've had some great new inquiries lately. Our land matcher is busy setting up site visits in the Cowichan Valley. And that is a really great way to attract farmers like Charles and Manzar, who came from Alberta to farm in the Cowichan Valley. And onto our requests. So we have had such a great relationship with the Cowichan Valley Regional District over the years. The funding support has been essential to allowing us to deliver this service on Vancouver Island and to focus our energies in the Cowichan Valley. So we are in year 3 of a 3-year funding period with $10,000 a year. We're requesting a renewal for that funding. So $10,000 a year over the next 3 years for a total of $30,000. And again, this will allow our land matcher to continue to focus her time in the Cowichan Valley for outreach events and land matching. And that is our request. So I would hand it back over to the facilitator.
Thank you, Darcy. Great presentation and great material. Many of us saw this, some of this at AVICC, and that was a fantastic presentation. I am just going to make a note for everyone. I've got Director McGonigal as well. We now apparently have a time pressure to get something done before the board meeting that has to be included in the board. So we have two items that are very closely related. If you have a specific question for Darcy, I'd entertain that, but we've got about 4 minutes to get two items done. And I think they're pretty straightforward. So I'll go to, looks like we're not going to get done by 12. I'll go to Director Acton first.
This is not a question for Darcy. Thank you for your presentation. I know that the program's been really successful, and so my comments have nothing to do with the appropriateness of funding this. I'm totally in support. But what I do have some issue with is it coming out of general government. So I'm reading general government's role, and it says the role of general government functions to cover regional administration expenditures for CVRD. Expenditure categories include board, executive office, legislative services, general manager, corporate services, communications, administrative services, finance, human resources, information technology, liability insurance, and GIS. So I think I don't feel like it's appropriate unless staff is going to say that, but I feel like this is at the moment, an economic development funded and supported. So it should be funded through there. And when I look under strategic investment, in 2020 we were 0. In 2021 we were 10,000. So I suppose that's where this is coming from. And then 2022 that line item went to 125,000. So what we're suddenly adding to this line item, I'm not clear what that is. Could be the strategic, but I'm not even sure what it is. And I just feel like this is not the appropriate way to fund it. We should fund it, but in this resolution it says that it comes from general government, and I think it's our responsibility to have better accounting than. Anyway, I guess another question is, how come it's not coming out of economic development?
So I think I'm going to interject here that there's a great word in here called consideration, and I think that that's a perfectly legitimate budget question, and this doesn't bind us in any way, shape, or form to the strategic initiatives part of general government. So if you could hold. No, it says consideration be given during the budget process. So we've got plenty of time to discuss and reallocate if we see fit. So can you live with that for the moment?
Can it be highlighted when the budget comes up? Because sometimes the budget comes up so fast, and then is it my responsibility to remember, or will it be mentioned?
I think our CAO has just nodded in agreement. Good enough? Director Stone?
Yeah, I don't want to get into the debate. Strategic Priorities Fund was done based on board direction. I'd like to move the resolution, and I'd also move R2.
Well, let's do them one at a time. Is there a seconder for R1? Moved and seconded. I have Director McGonigal and Martman on here. No, pass. Director Martman? Pass. Call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Not opposed. The motion carries. Go to Director Stone.
I'll move R2.
Is there a seconder? We have seconders around the room. Any discussion on R2? Everyone is clear on what R2 is. Don't need you to read it. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Not opposed. The motion carries. We have an item on the closed agenda that needs to be considered for this afternoon. We also have other items that are incomplete at this point. I'm told that lunch is not here yet, so we're going to crack on for a little bit. As soon as lunch comes, we can break. What's the pleasure of the committee? We've still got open items, but we definitely have to get the closed item. Do you want to resolve into closed and then come back to open? What's your pleasure? What's your pleasure? We have our parliamentarian saying crack on with open, and one of us has said let's get the closed.
Sorry, Mr.
Director
Chair,
Stone.
just as a thematic thing, I would move R3.
R3's been moved and seconded. Of course, everybody's read all the reports and knows what this is all about. We don't need it read out, do we? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Okay, hang on. We'll just suspend that from happening. Your belief that it happened, Director Nicholson.
That's okay. I just had a question about that one.
Fire away.
So my understanding is that the province and the federal government normally have programs related to crop trials. And I guess we just contributed a bit of funding to this. So I'm wondering what kind of programs are coming up, because this is a huge issue.
Through the chair, the program that this came out of was run through Investment Agriculture Foundation BC, and the program, federal, provincial funding for that program came to an end, and they're no longer running it, and the province is reviewing their approach. So essentially, this was a lot of great work done here, and it's dead in the water for now until we hear back. But we have mentioned this to VIU and their regenerative agriculture program, and they're seeing potential opportunities to incorporate it in at the local level. Thank you.
All right, that's been moved, seconded, and passed. And I just got, yeah, we did. Yeah, I was just asking everyone to suspend belief that we had. We should really go to R4. No, R4 is really important too, because there's a June 30th deadline. It's been moved and seconded. So this is Transit Operating Agreement. I'm sure everyone read the full AOA, and it's important. I'm looking to Director Nicholson with a look on her face like maybe she wants to talk about it.
I don't want to, I'm fine with it. When I looked at this agenda and thinking back to our strategic planning session and the discussion around climate change, the province is really falling short on the funding of so many important things. And, I get they've got issues, but when we talk about advocacy, I think we really need to figure out how we can target some of these really important things. Like this, the transit thing, again, we're short on expanding our service to Eagle Heights area, which is in my area, which is so close to town. And it would really help on this push to try and make it safer for people to get around without using their cars.
Thank you.
Sorry I had to say that.
Director Stone.
Here, here.
Okay, we got a here. Can we have an attaboy? Director Wilson.
Yeah, I have no problem with approving this at all. One of the things that comes up over and over and over again, especially in the more rural areas such as mine, is why I've got these huge buses. And I know I've asked the question before, and I've had the answer is because that's what the province gives us, or that's what BC Transit gives us. But let's seriously look into the smaller buses, the more adaptable, the more maneuverable buses that we need to let people get into into the smaller roads where we can pick up people. We don't need behemoths wandering around the world empty. So if Transit could look into getting some of the smaller, more adaptable ones, so much the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wilson. Did we have this moved and seconded? Yep. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. We're not going to go on to the next one, I don't think. I think we should make sure that closed session item is addressed. Is this going to cause staff issues to roll into closed now? Or we could refer it to the closed board if you wish. Director Stone, do you want us to refer this important item in closed session that we get, or for closed session of committee of the whole, straight to the board? Sure. Closed session? But how do we, hang on, how do we do that? Because it's. Gotta go into closed to make a referral motion.
Just say CS R2
Yeah, we could. Because it's part of the agenda discussion at this meeting, so we could.
I'm hearing our parliamentarian say that we could entertain a motion to refer CSR2 to the closed session of the board. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, let's go to R5. That's next on the docket, right?
Okay,
Ms. Ferguson.
R5 is a report from the General Manager, Community Services Department, Regional Recreation Commission Governance Procedures.
Mr. Elzinga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you can see on the agenda, there are reports regarding regional recreation governance. We committed a while back to doing bite-sized portions as we moved along, but staff are starting to get a little bit concerned with the timeline, so you're going to see a couple of those bits today. So I believe the first one is the report on procedures. This is really taken from the foundation of existing commission bylaws. I believe they're fairly straightforward. There's 10 items that are in there for your consideration as listed.
Mr. Elzinga, just a quick question before we go to Director Stone. You mentioned bite-sized pieces, and I know that we've already, as a committee and as a board, looked at the makeup of these committees and the somewhat lack of public participation. When would be an appropriate time to maybe have a second discussion about that?
So, Mr. Chair, you can revisit that at any time. This could be a time, but R6 is probably more important around that discussion because if you're talking about changing membership, it potentially changes staff's recommendations around delegated powers and responsibilities.
Director Stone.
Sorry, I was just going to say, this seems to be predicated on the composition of those commissions. So, to me, you have to solve the commission versus committee, elected versus community, before you talk about the authorities that they would be empowered with. I've heard from a number of directors about community-based representation. My position has been commissions versus committees that I would be quite comfortable to see citizen-based committees making recommendations to the board, like happens with most of local governments that use community members to make those advisory decisions, with an elected official being ex officio. But open it up to the group, because I don't think we can start talking about the terms of reference and the delegated authorities without settling once and for all, hopefully, on the composition of representation.
Might I, I'll go to Director Segal next.
Yeah, I was very prepared to speak to R6, and now I'm a bit thrown. But I was going to suggest that we make the delegated authority at the level of advice and recommendation to the board, so that we have the flexibility if we want to change membership when we revisit this at a year. Like right now, we've already passed that it's going to be elected officials and some community members. But if we're reopening the conversation about membership, I'm in support of community-appointed volunteers. I think it's so important. Sorry, I didn't know if it was on. So important to leverage our volunteers and involve them in community. The advice that I get from the APC and the CPAC is so beneficial to my work here on the board, and as an APC member when I was one. Just being involved in community was so fulfilling. So I think providing more opportunities like that for our community is really great.
So I'm going to do a really quick round table just on a really simple question, and we'll go with what folks seem to think. I think the question should be, do we want to have a second look at the membership and the format of the committee commissions before we consider these? Yes or no? Can you keep count, please? And I'll go counterclockwise to Director Acton first? Just a simple yes or no. Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yes,
Do we want to reconsider
yes, I
what
do.
we've already approved? Okay.
Yes, I would really like to.
Director Douglas.
No.
Director Martman. Director Dick. Director Nicholson. Director Justice.
Yes.
Director Stone.
No.
Director Toporowski.
No.
Director McGonigal.
Yes.
Director Wilson. Director Segal.
Yes.
Abbott.
Yes.
McClinton.
Can I abstain?
No, you're in the room.
No.
Director Manhus.
No.
Was that a no?
Yes, yes, wasn't it?
And I'm a yes. No. We're waiting. Do. Okay, the answer, 9 said no, 8 said yes, that's 17.
You voted twice.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's what? 9-7?
8-8?
It's 8-8. Fails. Wasn't an official vote, so let's contemplate the, yeah,
Should have let me abstain.
can't abstain.
I know I'm not allowed. I'm just teasing.
Okay, so that gets us back to R5. And did we have anybody move that yet? We did? Okay, so R5. Mr. Elzinga, it's all in the report. Any other comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to stress that recreation commissions traditionally have been different from advisory planning commissions and parks commissions. So traditionally, recreation commissions have had delegated authority from the board for certain powers and responsibilities, unlike parks commissions and advisory planning commissions. So there are two ways to go. Right now, as is written in the report, the Cowichan Community Center Commission is basically made up of elected officials that have obviously the representation from the community, and that's not a concern for staff. The other three commissions of the CBRD, the recreation commissions, have the ability for unelected, appointed community members to outvote the people around this board at that level. So staff feel uncomfortable with a certain level of delegated authority to unappointed community members if they can outvote the representation in this room. So there are two ways to address that. One is to increase the elected official representation, or the other is to take away the powers and responsibilities. So staff have recommended in this report to increase elected official representation, unlike the 2015 report that suggested the other way to do that is to take away the powers and responsibilities. What staff have heard to date around regional recreation is you want to have commissions to have the decision-making power at the community level. However, those are the two potential avenues that staff could recommend.
Thank you. Director Acton.
So if I'm understanding this right, the delegation, as suggested, is just a little too strong for community members. And we have a strong, half of the board would like to see more community involvement. And it's surprising that that community engagement is, and community involvement is even on our strategic plan, since this is a strategic plan item in my mind. To increase community involvement, and it's an so I still, even as it's written, I don't see how it supersedes the board when it's an advisory. So they could even say we don't advise it, and then it comes here and we get the final decision. So I guess there's that balance of these community centers and rinks and all of them were founded by the community and grew from the community, and the community saying, we still want involvement. We still want to be part of, and they're the user groups, they have a better understanding, or at least a better, equally as important representation as the elected official, who then we come back, as the elected officials, we are to hear the voice of the community and then not necessarily to represent it at a committee level. So I'm really struggling when we've had, in the past, legislative services say that it's really not good governance to be advising yourself as well. So I know that's a lot of information, and I'm just trying to wrap it around my head too.
So we've got a resolution before us included in the staff report that is our professional staff's recommended path forward based on a whole bunch of information that has been considered by this board, previous boards. Do we have someone prepared to move the resolution? Moved by Director Douglas, seconded by Director Nicholson. Director Segal.
Yeah, I guess I'm not in support of the recommendation, and that I would like to see the delegated authority be at the level of advice and recommendations to the board, so that as we move forward with this new model of regional recreation commissions, we have the flexibility to include more community members.
Director Stone.
So just a question then, so if there wasn't the motion passed, would those items still not have to come back to the board for sort of ratification? So in a sense, we would be advising ourselves still.
Mr. Elzinga, any thoughts on that?
So, Mr. Chair, through to Director Stone, if staff could clarify, are we on the resolution from R6 around powers and responsibilities delegated authority? What is the motion that was
We're
moved
on
and seconded?
R5.
Okay, we're on,
I'm on
I'm on
R5.
R5.
okay. So if the resolution is R5,
Yes, that's,
Sorry, but yes, R6 is highlighted.
okay, so let me just clarify with the mover and the seconder. Were you talking R5
10
or were you
principles.
talking R6? The 10 principles of the outline in the Regional Recreation Governance Commission procedures. Please read the recommendation.
R5's recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that the 10 principles outlined in the Regional Recreation Governance Commission Procedures Staff Report to the Committee of the Whole meeting of June 14th, 2023 be included in the new Sub-Regional Recreation Commission bylaws.
So was that your intent as the mover and seconder? So we have a live motion on the floor from R5 that's just been read. Any discussion on that item? Director Segal.
I just have a question through the chair to Mr. Elzinga. So is R5 dependent on the decision made in R6, or are they independent?
Mr. Elzinga.
I think my best clarification would be they're independent. I believe R5 can stand on its own because it does speak to community members and to both elected officials. It just doesn't speak to how many community members, right? So I believe, without going right back into it, that it can stand as it is on its own.
Director Acton to the motion. Seeing no further hands, I'll call the question. Oh, wait a minute, Director McGonigal, you were R6? Okay. On R5, you've heard the motion read. All in favor? Any opposed? One opposed. The motion carries. Director Stone.
We're going to go on to R6. I was just getting on the list.
New list. Do you have any introduction to R6, Mr. Elzinga?
I don't think I have anything to add at this point, Mr. Chair. I think I stand on my previous comments that there are two pathways forward that staff could recommend. Obviously, the first one that staff would recommend, as is written in the report, is the elected official and community member numbers as previously decided by the board as of the April reports. So staff are standing on those numbers. But there is a pathway forward for advisory recommendations to the board.
So I've got Director Stone and Segal, and I've just been informed that we have a consultant waiting for a closed session item for this part.
For this part?
And for it, not for this item, but for
I'm so hungry.
closed.
Sorry,
now.
that's not my point. I don't want to use up my question time. So this was actually the question I was talking about before. This is where the rubber hits the road. So when we make these policies that would be programming, et cetera, would those come to this body to be ratified, or would those decisions be made at the sub-regional commission level and we'd never see them here?
Mr. Elzinga.
So, Mr. Chair, through to Director Stone, the items that are listed in the report as part of the recommendation, so policies that would apply sub-regionally and are of a community-specific nature, including some programming decisions, some standards for the provision of service, some dispute resolution, all of those types of things would be decided at the commission level and would not come to this body. So that's the items that we're talking about can be made by commissions as decisions, not as recommendations.
Follow-up?
So my follow-up is, if we're going with the way that things are currently set up, I can support this. If we're going to have this discussion about it being more community-centric, I cannot. So just to test it, I would move the recommendation.
It's been moved and seconded. I have a speakers list. Director Segal.
Okay, so I just want everyone to know my speech from before is slide that in here now. I agree. If we are moving forward with commissions as we've set out in previous meetings, that this is the appropriate way forward. But when we passed that, there was a significant amount of discussion around the opportunity to involve more community members, and that would be easy to discuss at a future date when we come back to this. But I think if we set the level of this delegated authority in a way that requires elected officials, we just lose that flexibility. But if we make it based on advice and recommendations to the board, we have flexibility around composition, which I would support. Thanks.
Thank you. Director McGonigal, followed by Nicholson.
Thank you very much. I think I'll just cut and paste Director Segal's speech. I've been an advocate for public participation in recreation commissions from the onset, as you probably know. I think it's important to get a diverse input from not only elected officials' viewpoint, but also from the public who are members of the community who reside and utilize the facility, and come forward as similar it has been in the past for recommendation and endorsement by this body. And at that time, those members who are not within the threshold of the 6% usage would have input on those recommendations. So that is my position, has been from the start, and will always be.
Thank you. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I am really big on public input, but I think that token people on a commission isn't really doing our job. And I think I'm on the Cowichan Community Center Commission now, which is basically follows this model, I believe, yeah. And it's worked very well. But what we don't do is very well is have an avenue to bring in the community's thoughts and comments on the Cowichan Center. And I don't think putting one person or two people from the community on the commission would actually provide us with the breadth of information that we need to understand about the people that use the recreation center. So I think that's the challenge. I think that this is the more efficient way to go at this time, but I would hope that we would pick up that challenge and try and figure out a way of making sure the community has more of a say when they need to have a say about the recreation centers.
Director Acton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel compelled to counter that comment, but I'm sorry. That wasn't my comment. I did want to state that, you know, when this went to referendum, the community said, yes, we want to support paying our fair share, but they didn't say we want to have less community involvement and less representation. And you do have, even by having one or two people, you have people who use the center, that's their lens that they're using all the time, and the community feels comfortable talking to them. They don't always feel comfortable talking to an elected official. So they're out there just shooting the breeze with people, and they'll ask them little tiny things. Why did those garbage cans get moved? Why did, you know, and it's, I think it's really important, and there's great value in it. So I won't be supporting this back to, and everybody knows why, so I'll shut up now.
Director Stone to close.
I'll pass.
Guess that means we're calling the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? 4 opposed, the motion carries. So I think I'm going to pose this question. Since we do need to resolve into close to deal with the CSR 3 item, is anyone opposed to grabbing some food, coming back in and dealing with that one item in closed? Can we do that? Okay, so let's, what's next? Question period. Oh yeah, it is, we're done. Question period. Call for anyone in the gallery who'd like to provide input on, or ask questions of the chair. Please no. Okay, move to resolve, can you read the resolution to resolve into close? Just to make it legal.
That the meeting be closed under sections 91A, 91E, and 91E.
Moved by Director Douglas, seconded by Director McGonigal. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. So let's now break for 10